So I guess the last time we talked was more than half a year ago now. It was fun, you know? I did it for no reason other than just, wanting to. And then I said that stupid thing and I made this whole plan and I couldn't do it. I think it was a matter of fortitude over anything else. It's strange to make promises to yourself, only to break them once you realize the truth of who you are and what you can do. But I did decide that I wouldn't let it all turn into nothing. I'd put so much of myself into it, and it felt like if it disappeared, that part of me would have too. I kept working, slowly of course, because what I didn't have in fortitude, I think I still have in passion. How could you not reflect the love and care of the creators? It's so plain to see the tangible purpose to all of it. The best of the best is... it's the pinnacle of the human mind. I can't not love it.
My name is Andrew Gast, and I have a lot of feelings about science fiction. The last video on my channel ended with me posing a rhetorical question to you, the audience. That question being, who could say in regards to the reason behind my liking iconoclasts being that I just like good pixel art and sci-fi. I posed it as a joke, but after publishing the video, I stared that dumb question dead in its dumb eyes for 2 months before fully realizing why I was so unhappy with it. The first and most obvious reason to me was that I had just spent more than 20 minutes describing why I actually liked iconoclasts, and posing the possibility that it was only because of my preconceived preferences really cheapens the rest of the video, especially when it's the bookend to the whole thing. The second reason is that rhetorical questions are lazy, and they do this thing where they make your point seem deeper on a totally superficial level, without actually doing anything to strengthen your point. If you present enough well-defined, thoughtful analysis, the audience should already be asking and answering those questions for themselves without your lackadaisical prompting. The third reason, and the reason I landed on making this video, is that it was a shitty rhetorical question, even by rhetorical question standards. Who could say? Not you. I am the only one who could say if I liked iconoclasts because it had good pixel art and was sci-fi, and that wasn't why, but just saying that wasn't good enough for me, so what I did was decide to play every game that fit both the criteria of pixel art and science fiction that I already owned, because I wasn't about to spend hundreds of dollars on this thing, with the purpose of either confirming or denying the dumb question that I asked months prior. This was also dumb. If you're at all in the know about the indie scene of video games or about the state of my Steam library, you'll know the reason that it's dumb is because the criteria of pixel art and sci-fi make up about 50% of indie game landscapery. In my lazily sorted yet already owned game libraries, I have 43 pixel art sci-fi titles. When I started my idea of this thing, I was assuming I'd be looking at around 10, yet every game I played reminded me of another one, and every time I found one of those, I seemed to stumble across another. I would cut off one head, and another two would sprout out, fueled by nothing more than a promise I made to myself that I would play every one of these. But now when I start playing them, it was never for enjoyment, it was for a task, a responsibility to create content for myself. And it was a mountainous task. Even if every one of these games was only a 4-hour experience, I was looking down the barrel of over 170 hours of gameplay recordings that would need editing into a format that I hadn't even thought of yet. Upon writing this sentence, I still hadn't even come up with that format. So, okay, Andrew, if that is your real name, just don't complete them. Play an hour or two, and then more if you really like it. Well, now that I'm cutting into the promise I made for myself, it pains me every time I drop a game after the point where they really get going. That's that 1 to 2 hour mark. I want to know what happens, not dread it like it's just a job. I don't make money off of this thing. I don't know if you consider what I do here and what I make art, but for myself I do. It's both a test and a showcase, not only of the skills that I've developed as I've made these videos, but of the feelings I feel and the thoughts that I think, put into a form that I can refine and then share. Back in my Sonic Adventure video, I lightly passed over the idea that there's no real way for anyone else to know me, because nobody else is me. By extension, I believe that this goes for everybody else too. This is an idea that came to me when I was 18, and I remember clearly the night that I thought it. For more than 8 years now, this ghost of existential loneliness has found ways to creep in through closed doors. And it's this ghost that frightens me into the things that I'm most proud of in my life. It's the connections I can and have made with other people, and how unafraid I am in sharing my honest self with them. That's where these videos come from, and that's why, not wanting to, frankly, waste my time playing 43 or more games that I don't even want to, started to eat me up. It was, in a roundabout way, a slight on the honesty that I feel is pretty essential to the guy that I am. As the weeks and then months went by, I thought these thoughts and played fewer and fewer of the games I kept telling myself that I had to. It was weirdly self-destructive for something that from an even little bit wider perspective kind of doesn't matter, and it had the easy fix of just, doing a video on something else. But in another way, these thoughts began to shape the framework of the way that I was looking at the games that I was playing. Not just as products to review, but as focal points of ideas in my head, and the way that they can represent more than one viewpoint simply by existing. I hope it doesn't feel like a logical leap, but what I landed on after so long of falling is that because my videos are very personal to me, and because this video in particular brought me so much distress that it fueled these thoughts, that this video would then be about my thoughts regarding the games that I played. Whatever I thought. Less focused, sure, but I haven't been able to focus. But the brain isn't really naturally focused anyways. We drift around really surprisingly easily from thought to thought, and with me acting as a guide, I think that I'll be able to drag you along with me and take you another step or two closer to knowing me. And maybe, and I do really just mean maybe, we'll be able to find out why it is there are so many pixel art sci-fi games and why the hell I like them so much. And I'm not finishing that list of games. I'm just not. Whew, okay. The first thing, other than myself, that I want to talk about is actually the topic that was originally going to be the crux of this whole video. That's the classification of what is considered science fiction. And not just in games, but specifically in books as well, as that's the medium that formed most of my opinions about the topic. The thesis I'm going to try to back here is that science fiction is far too broad a term for what is a huge spectrum of content, and what I propose as a replacement is dividing it into subsections of 3 different types of science fiction. Those being, number 1, hard science. Number 2, speculative.
Thanks for the coat, Mom.
Number 3, dystopian. We'll come back to this thesis soon. If you look up science fiction subgenres, you'll find dozens of different specifics like alien invasion, uplift, generation ship, cli-fi, space western, and solar punk. Obviously, every genre is going to have deeply specific classifications for their own media, but science fiction in particular gets a ton of these really weird ones that differ so much from one another, and I think the reason for that is because of how all-encompassing the term science fiction really is. What I mean by this in a totally concrete sense is that literally any piece of fiction that is set at any point in the future is considered science fiction. Think about this. If you're looking at standard fiction about humans, you have a reasonable time frame of history to write in of about 10,000 years, with most fiction, even most prolific fiction, falling within the last 200 or so. Science fiction, on the other hand, covers everything else, from 10 years into the future to a billion, from this universe to another. Fiction that exists outside of the space of what already occurred is 100% of the time called science fiction. And what this does is it forces this enormous array of potential stories into a teeny tiny box, a box that is extremely easy for someone who's just not into one specific subgenre of this genre to push away. While I do understand that genres can coexist and overlap, and frequently do, I think that sci-fi as a whole, no matter what other genres it gets paired up with, gets a bad rap for being just kind of weird, far enough off the beaten path that it's really difficult to recommend science fiction media to somebody without already knowing if that person is down with the genre. Telling someone they should read Neuromancer is almost like telling someone they should watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Like, it's really good, highly acclaimed, and a personal favorite. But also it's anime. Which is where I think my 3 proposed genres should come into play, at least in personal vernacular. I don't expect or even really want these to be so widely adopted that they get their own filing in bookstores. I mostly just think that selling a friend on something speculative is easier than selling them on,
it's a story about when aliens find Earth and then send over incomprehensible weaponry in an attempt to steal the planet.
Or even just recommending any science fiction, and they give you that kind of hesitant, "Ah, I understand the kind of person you are now," face in response. Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah. I don't know, I'm not good at it. It's because I care. So back to my proposed genre split. I'll tell you what I mean by each of the 3 subgenres. Number 1, Pure, hard science fiction is something like Andy Weir's The Martian, or the work of Robert J. Sawyer in his Neanderthal Parallax series. Obviously, all fiction, especially work set in the future, will hold speculation, but hard science fiction to me is more about setting a premise with that speculation, and then using verifiable facts and practical science to make it into a complete work. Number 2, pure speculative sci-fi goes pretty far off the rails and is the biggest of these three, because it covers most of the thousands to billions of years in the future. This is where speculation and imagination are at the core of a work, something set so far away from our current place and time that all you can do is take things at its word and go along for the ride. My favorite examples of these are the Three-Body Problem series by Cixin Liu and the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. Dystopian science fiction should be pretty self-explanatory, but it's the most egregious outlier to the genre. There are a million of these, but examples are The Road by Cormac McCarthy and Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I hope you can see what I mean now, though, that it's kind of crazy that The Road, a story about a father and son slowly dying after an implied nuclear war, is put in the same category as The Expanse, an enormous political space epic. Not only that, but science fiction is frequently not even left on its own. Almost everywhere that lists sci-fi as a genre lists it as sci-fi and fantasy. How can we live with ourselves, putting a Game of Thrones on the same shelf as 2001: A Space Odyssey? Well, I think it's happening on purpose. I think big media is colluding with big book to cordon off everything even slightly fringe into the same space as the insanely fringe, cutting off a huge portion of the public to important literature. And the reason they're doing this to science fiction in particular is because looking into and hoping for or working for alternate potential futures than the one that we're currently heading for is dangerous to the status quo. It's the same reason the war on drugs rages on in so many regions of the world. They don't want you to open your eyes. They don't want you to reach for the Star Trek future where humanity unites to a common goal. It's not profitable. They don't want you to think about the implications of the Fermi paradox and how small humanity is in the grand scheme of the universe. How the nearest star to us, Alpha Centauri, is 4.3 light years away, more than 270,000 times further than the distance from the Earth to the Sun. They don't want you to build hover cars in your garage and race through the streets at hundreds of kilometers per hour, ignoring the wail of police sirens behind you. They want you to work, and then they want you to die. But let it be known that I want you to hope, and I want you to dream, and I want you to love. Anyways, I make videos about video games. I played a bunch of these things to try to make this video, and I'd be pretty chock full of remissness if I didn't go on to give some kind of review for these guys, so let's lightning round these bad boys in order from most enjoyed to least enjoyed, and then we can move along to other train of thoughtsy topics. Number 1, Into the Breach. This one's from the guys who also did another game on this list, FTL, and it's just the smartest game that you will ever play, both in how it's designed and how it makes you feel. The gameplay concept is that you're given a set number of turns to achieve some tasks with your 3 unique units and not die. Where this game is unique from others is that the enemy tells you precisely how they will proceed with their next turn, and you have to mitigate damage dealt both to you and the cities you're defending, while beating the bad guys and succeeding in completing the missions. Every time you take a good turn, it's like a Thanksgiving dinner for your brain's reward centers, except there's less implicit racism, and you don't have to sit at the end of the kid table even though you're in your mid to late 20s. We're really just going for it with the outfits here. I only have so many clothes. Number 2, CrossCode. This is like if video games were video games, but real life. It's an action RPG with a great story, fun characters and writing, tight gameplay, and some seriously, I need to go outside and take a walk and maybe call my girlfriend and chew on some ice types of puzzles, and 1 million billion secrets. Ridiculously good, and a great twist on the anime trope of being a hottie who everyone loves and who is sucked into a video game. When I played through this, I was thinking, finally, a product that doesn't just parody my real life. Because, you know, I'm a hottie and I get sucked into video games really easily, and a lot of people really like me. Number 3, Hyper Light Drifter.
Buddy!
I have a lot to say about this one, but in short, this is one of those games are art games that doesn't eschew its own sense of play in the process. It's hard for me to nail down exactly what it is I like so much about this one in lightning round format, other than it's gorgeous and cool as fuck. But if you want a sense of what it's like to both play and feel this game, just watch its release trailer. Actually, let's watch some right now because I want it in the video. When I play this game, I feel as if I'm watching a boy wander through a dark forest that he knows very well. He uncovers a rock and finds a great number of insects and creatures crawling underneath. He looks down at them and smiles, and calls them his friends. The game's music is also done by the guy who did Fez's music. Goes by Disasterpiece, or Rich Vreeland, if you're interested. It's really unreal. Number 4, Enter the Gungeon. Best roguelite out there. Isaac lovers can kick rocks. Number 5, VA11 Hall A. Cyberpunk Bartender Action. Valhalla. Most of my time playing this visual novel drink maker thing was spent wondering if that's a great name because it's weird, or a shit one because you get nowhere with it with search engine optimization. It's written well and it's cute, nice sounds in it, you make drinks and chat with anime girls, and it's not weird because you also play as an anime girl yourself. That scientifically makes it less weird. Oh, my cat's throwing up. Bubba? You okay, Bubba? Number 6, Jumpjet Rex. This one is really going to change the gaming landscape forever. You are a customizable T-Rex who has rocket boots, and you have to get to the end of levels and get the money. If you want to. It's extremely simple and it's deliciously tight. You die in one hit and restart levels in under a second. It's meant to be optimized to the extreme, and the gameplay is great enough that it feels good to do so. This is one of the only games on this list that I didn't want to put down after I was done recording what I felt like I needed to. Number 7, One Step from Eden. If you played Mega Man Battle Network as a kid, this is that, but juiced and squeezed. I didn't play Mega Man Battle Network as a kid, and this was still that, but juiced and squeezed. You'll probably feel like a stupid idiot the first few times you lose immediately at this game, but getting it down pat is real nice. I imagine. I never got it down pat because it's really hard. Number 8, Crying Suns. It's like FTL, but it's actually got a story that matters, so reading the words on the screen doesn't make you feel like you're wasting your time. Battle system is kind of really shallow, but it has a nice narrative thread that incorporates its roguelike structure. Plus, it has the freshest UI this side of the Mississippi. I want my phone to do this kind of thing. That'd be cool. Number 9, FTL. It's like Crying Suns, but it's so hard that you basically have to start memorizing events and outcomes in order to min-max your way to a victory. If you enjoy ramming your head into a wall for 40 hours just to watch the dent in it get bigger, then more power to you, but I will still look at you wondering what's wrong, and if you're okay. I won't ask you though, because you intimidate me. Number 10, Panzer Paladin. Kinda like the old Mega Mans, but a little clumsier and a little weirder. You run into this guy every level who drops a weapon made by someone else online, which is really neat. It also has this filter that makes it do that CRT curve and blur thing. Hammerwatch did this too. I think it looks really great with pixel art. I still really like this one, but it didn't have much staying power for me. Number 11, Kero Blaster. Kero Blaster? This is by the guy who made that game that no indie developer could ever possibly live up to, Cave Story. This one is cute and fun. You play as a little frog guy who's trying to both do his job and save the day, which is kind of his job. This game is like 12 megabytes big, which is cool to see. There's no tricks up its sleeve. It's just neat little shooty game. Number 12, Don't Escape 4 Days to Survive. Point and click adventure game. You gotta make it through 4 days. The game has degrees of success and failure, and if you go throughout your day wasting time and not preparing properly, you will not survive and will be forced to restart at your last save point. But if you screwed up too badly by the last time you saved, you'll need to run a full restart. It's brutal and stressful and really well written. There's a lot more than you'd think in here, and each day is a new and difficult gut-wrenching challenge. This is probably a better game than a lot of the games listed above it on this list, but I found it too stressful to put it higher. One of those games that's really good but not really fun. If you want a good modern point-and-click adventure game, try this one out. There's no moon logic. Number 13, Tales of the Neon Sea, point-and-click adventure-y. You're this detective guy and also this cat. It's pretty, has some good vibes. Not immaculate, but I'd make friendly conversation with the vibes and keep in touch until we inevitably go down different paths in life and one day just stop talking. I still have them on Snapchat and Instagram, but you don't really reach out anymore. Sure, I miss them, but I'm so different from the person that I used to be, and, you know, the vibes probably are too. I'm sure they're getting by just fine. So am I. Bubba, do not eat that, it's not real! That's not real grass! Number 14, Desert Child. You do this, and this. It's pretty much just vibes. But they do vibe. Number 15, Graze Counter. I bought a few of these bullet hell games, and man, they are just not very fun. This one had the benefit of having a cool system where you get extra points or power-ups or whatever by narrowly missing bullets, so it kind of incentivizes this risk-reward system of getting close but not too close to enemy projectiles, but that's kind of it. Do be stylish though. Number 16, Steel Vampire. This is another one of the bullet hell games that... This is not pixel art at all. I don't know why it's categorized here. I think looking back at footage, I like this more than Graze Counter, but I already wrote this one and put it in this numbered list in this exact format. So It's just going to stay below Graze Counter because it's not pixel art. It's got a neat difficulty system too, but I'll be damned if I remember how it works. I think I got it for $1 alongside a fun trivia game. I'll put it up here. Number 17. Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor. I feel like I can't stop thinking about this game in the weirdest ways. It's so strange. You get cursed by this skull thing right away early and it keeps going blah at you, which sucks, but what you do is walk around the city and pick up and sell trash every day to try to earn enough money to stay alive and eventually get off the planet. It's repetitive and sad, and you're really just this down-on-her-luck wage slave who nobody knows in the middle of a place bustling with life that doesn't give a shit about you. The game is also intentionally dizzying. There's no end to the city. It seamlessly loops when you reach one side. But it doesn't loop from east to west. No, when you leave out the east side of the map, you enter back in from the south. And when you leave from the north, you go back in from the west. You're never supposed to know where you're going, and it absolutely sucks major eggs to play, but it's done so with intent. So it's not like bad in this traditional sense. It just is brutal and depressing, and it made me feel like literally sick as I played it. I probably put in like an hour or two more than I needed to for footage because I was just so intrigued by all the stuff it kept telling me and throwing at me and hinting me towards, but mostly it's just clutter. The clutter of hundreds of souls desperately vying for enough money to get either by or out. I highly, highly recommend playing this just so you too can experience this absolute anomaly of a piece of media. The last one that I want to mention here is at the end of the list, not because it is the worst, but because I want you to remember it. It's called OneShot. I can't put it up on the screen here because after beating it, the game changes in a distinct way that cannot, for all I tried, be reset, and would be a massive, enormous spoiler. It's a little RPG Maker adventure game that has some extremely mechanically interesting things going on for it that I dare not spoil. It's like the same level of meta interesting as Undertale or Doki Doki Literature Club. You can get the game for like $5 on sale. Note, after writing this but before filming it, the game was actually announced for consoles too. So now if you don't have a PC or that's not an easy option for you, you have another one. I still recommend it on PC, but more eyes on it, right? Some of these games were simple, almost one-note types of ideas. Arcade shooter, point-and-click adventure, level-based side-scroller, a copy of a form already tried and true, with a new coat of paint, while others are deep, multi-layered, story-driven experiments, or highly produced, polished experiences with infinite replayability. Others were Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor. On paper, the only things that they have in common are the traits that I already attributed to them: science fiction, pixel art. But there's also this thread that's totally impossible to ignore, and something I feel like I don't get to see as often as I'd like. It's that behind the scenes of each of these, there's a sense of Ikigai. But not this Ikigai that you may have seen before. No, this chart is actually a westernized misinterpretation of the concept. It's a cool chart and motivating in its own right, but it ties this word Ikigai, which translates pretty literally into life purpose, which sells the word a little short, into a challenging endpoint, something it is to be achieved and perfected. Like if you don't check all 4 boxes, you haven't really made it. But that kind of, to me, defeats the purpose of the idea of purpose. This chart, with Ikigai sitting in the center, was, as far as I could determine, first used by Spanish author and astrologer Andres Zuzunaga, with the word proposito or purpose in the center. Great concept, solid execution, different from Ikigai. After its Spanish inception, it was translated into English, and purpose was replaced with Ikigai for a blog post made by this guy, Mark Wynn, who seems like an alright guy with some decent causes and experiences under his belt, but is more than a couple glasses into the corporate Kool-Aid, or in his case, coffee. So Mark's version got huge, you start to see it everywhere, and now it's pretty frequently being used in a corporate structure to try to trick employees into thinking that this business has the answers you're looking for in life, when it's total bullshit. The truth of the concept of Ikigai is that the Japanese use the word in casual conversation, understand its nuances, and don't try to invent a new level of grandeur for it. One's Ikigai doesn't have to be something they're good at, or something the world needs, or something you can get paid for. It doesn't even have to be something you love. The concept of the word is pretty nebulous, and there's very, very little English reading on the subject that doesn't refer to the mimetic Venn diagram, but there's a pretty good podcast that features a ton of great info from ikigaitribe.com, and the most important line I took away was from an interview with Dr. Yasuhiro Kotera, academic lead at Derby University. He says, paraphrased a little bit, Ikigai is not just about a theoretical conceptual idea, it's an experiential one, and I think art can create a lot of that experience, and this feeling. That's all still a quote. That's where these video games go. And I think a big part of my getting from them an unshakable sense of Ikigai comes from the idea that what these creators have made is an art akin to the exact kind of art that I've wanted to create since I was a kid. And it's an art form that doesn't feel so out of reach that it's impossible. It doesn't take a person with 3,000 hours of artistic experience to download a sprite in Game Maker Studio and put something together. Far be it from me to say it's easy, as you know, I've been struggling to put one video out, but it's not so far away that it could never happen. I think that what I managed to put my finger on after deliberating for so long why I like this non-genre so much is that for me, it's kind of like looking into a mirror at a version of myself that doesn't but still could exist. That might be where the struggle of making this video came from too. I chose a passion project and barely had the will to follow through with it. If you count the fact that I played through less than half of what my original goal was, I straight up didn't follow through with it. But despite the melancholy of occasionally feeling this failure of self, I'm not stopped from admiring the creators of these games, the versions of myself that just aren't me. My what could have been is someone else's reality, and for the most part it's not jealousy that comes forth, it's pride that these guys who are undoubtedly like me in more ways than one are doing it, or already did. The fact that a game like Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor exists is proof to me that a guy like me could and has made it happen in a way that's important to him. This dizzying capitalist nightmare of a video game in its own right reflects this sensation too. The protagonist works to scrape together enough to make it off planet. It's this idea of getting up every day and doing something to make it happen, whatever that it might be for a given individual. You also, in the game, find yourself drawn to the entrance of a sewer where you're cursed by a floating skull, which really just speaks for itself. I think that it's in this regard that I'm finding the overlap between science fiction and pixel art video games. I know a lot of people are tired of the aesthetic, but it exists for a reason. Anybody could make a game with two-dimensional sprites, but only those that do it find proper personal meaning in it. And the same goes for science fiction. You don't begin to write sci-fi, even terrible sci-fi, unless you have a story in you. Without seeing something in the world that you believe you can project into the future, whether it's to teach a lesson or to reach out to someone's heart or boggle the mind with a story impossible to place in a time like our own. The overlap is that of passion and purpose. It's this Ikigai of creation that I think that I also see in myself. It's not just respectable, it's cool. At the end of it all, genre definitions and video games aside, I kind of can't help but come back to that which has frequently resonated on this channel, and that what's most important to me is most important to me because it's most important to me. I get to pick that for myself, and you get to pick it for yourself. I'm not saying you need to practice classical stoicism, but I think there's value in getting metaphorically grabbed and shaken by the shoulders. Like, it's not your fault what happened to you. But it is still you, and that's all that it is. Looking for meaning externally will take you down a rabbit hole that loops back on itself infinitely, but accepting that meaning begins and ends in you gives you a place to hang your hat. It's hard to remember sometimes, but right now, in this moment, I'm choosing to hang my hat on pixel art video games, science fiction, this very video, and the support network that keeps me upright. And guess what, idiot? You're a part of it too, if you watch this video. So thanks.